So, welcome everyone to another episode of Carving a New Path. My name is Andrea Hylen, and I am the host of this show. And before I start with a conversation with my guest today, I want to just presence that this podcast began in 2020 in response to all the change that people were experiencing. And I really wanted to have conversations with guests who had had some kind of disruption in their life, something that changed, something where they ended up at a crossroads, and that they listened to their inner voice and they birthed new ways of being in the world. And this was happening before the pandemic, and it is happening now, and it will happen in the future. So, yeah, so that's the foundation of the conversations. So today, my guest is Marie Ek Lipanovska. And before I introduce her with an official bio, I just want to share that Marie lives in Sweden, and we met in a coaching program at an event in Colorado in the United States in 2011. Marie then said yes to writing a story in the second Heal My Voice program, Empowered Voices. And then she started Heal My Voice Sweden in 2012, which was just something that neither of us would have predicted when we first met. And I felt like I wanted to say that today because it's these unpredictable moments. And those are the crossroads. So this will definitely be a future show that we'll talk about that. But for now, all right, let me just tell you something briefly about Marie. She helps women become a good mother to themselves and to develop a deep and personal relationship to God. She does this through meditation, writing, and art. She's also a writer, an illustrator, an artist, and meditation teacher. And as I said, she is the founder of Heal My Voice Sweden and a publisher of 13 books. So the title of the show today is Abba, My Heavenly Father, not the Swedish pop group, which I love that. That is a title that Marie shared with me. I love that. And today we're going to begin a three-part series on the transformation she has had in her relationship to God from what she would call the creator to her own very personal dad. So, Abba, as Jesus calls him, Abba is father in Aramaic, and this is the language that Jesus spoke. So, I would love, Marie, to have you begin by sharing with the listeners how you started to have a relationship with God, and then we'll go from there.
Hmm. Oh, when you spoke about the podcast, Carving a New Path and disruption, that is what happened. And I have that specific date. And I even remember it was a Tuesday.
Mm.
So it was on January 19, 1999. I entered a women's circle, and the leader was one of my closest friends. And for the first time, I sat down in a guided meditation. And in that guided meditation, I met God. I was not brought up in a Christian home. I'm baptized, and I also when I was a teenager, I don't know the English word, but in Swedish it's called confirmation. You know, it's like some kind of confirmation.
Confirmation, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it was not of a religious reasons. In Sweden, most of us are Christian, you know,
Mm-hmm.
without even practicing the religion. So I didn't have a relationship to God before that. But I think I had some kind of idea about that a greater power of something. But in that moment, in that guided meditation, it felt almost like I was taken out of myself and brought into another reality. And the one who took me away from myself, or this reality, into something else, was the Archangel Gabriel.
Mm.
It was like he reached down from a cloud. That's how I remember the image. He reached down from a cloud. I saw his hands. I took his hands, and he pulled me out of the mountain in the inner, in the meditation environment. And I was brought into a light and also a lightness, It felt like weightless almost. And I felt like I was surrounded by love.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in my life, I realized that I am loved. And also with that, I realized that I had never felt really loved. And for me, it was obvious. I am in God. This is God. He is love. He is light. He is peace. He is joy. And leaving the angel and, going back into my own body, that's what it felt like. Going back into my body that was almost a trauma, actually. I was crying like a baby. I didn't want to return to this reality.
Yeah.
It felt like there is nothing for me to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
But I was the mother of two, so I had kids. I was married, but I didn't want to leave that love. So I cried all the way back, when she was guiding us in this meditation. And when we afterwards were sharing a meal and also the experience of the meditation, I cried. And when I came home and I was trying to tell my husband what I have experienced, I cried. And I realized that from that moment, I will never be the same. And I get sad when I say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And take a minute because it
was just it was such a profound and deep experience. And it set me on a search for that love. I need to live in that love.
Mm-hmm.
Not in meditation, not in that state, but here in my life, I need to live in that love. And it was so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd stayed in that group with women for 4 years. But it also disrupted so much inside of me that I couldn't handle it. That light also made my darkness visible.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't handle that big difference between love and not love, light and darkness, joy and whatever. So
Yeah. Let's pause there for a moment because as you're talking, there were a couple of things that I started thinking about, and I want to pause so that the reader or the listeners have a minute also. first of all, this is something that happened 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And to understand that when we have awakenings of some kind, which doesn't happen once, it happens over and over again. Like you've had cycles of waking up to a new understanding, more information, and that just and so here you felt this purity of love and the contrast of it was like an extreme from one feeling to what is it that you're actually living in, and that it doesn't just happen overnight where all of a sudden, oh, okay, I felt love. So now everything is love around me. No, it's actually just the opposite, that you do start to see where there's piles of garbage throughout your life. I mean, I had someone say that to me once in a uh, seminar, like a personal growth seminar. They said, well, now you walk down the street that used to look pristine to you in some way, and you start to see the piles of garbage, and you go, who put this garbage here? Or why do I have to walk through this garbage or whatever? And that is more common than, oh, just everything is light and love all around you. So how did you um okay, so for 4 years you stayed in the group, so that was a level of support for you.
Yeah.
And how did you begin to navigate your life as you saw the contrast between the light and the dark?
I remember my teacher, or my meditation teacher who led the meditation. She said, something like, this is so natural for you, and I have to learn it.
Mm.
And looking back when I was a teenager and going to church for the confirmation, the only thing that I remember of all those months was when the priest led us in a guided meditation.
Mm.
So looking back, I realized that is a gift that God planted in me as a teenager.
Mm.
So when I stepped into that group the first time, she opened a door into a world that I already had.
Mm.
When the other participants, saw things in black and white, I was walking like I was walking in the nature.
Mhm.
All my senses, it's like, this is just another world, but it's still the same world. So, and navigating became too hard for me because it was almost like those first 4 years, the light was more like in my mind.
Mhm.
It hadn't reached the depth of me. And I couldn't handle it at the end. I had to stop
Mhm.
because it felt like I'm going to be crazy, actually. I can't sort the information. I can't, be awake in this way because it's not healthy for me.
Mhm.
So I had to stop. For years, several years, I didn't meditate. And then I began again after the divorce. Because somewhere, along the way, I realized that this is knowing that God exists, and what I find in that relationship to God, I need to share in my daily life with a partner.
Mm.
because it turns the whole world upside down, how I view the world, why I'm here. So I had to divorce because we couldn't share that center of life that God is for me.
Yeah.
And I started to meditate again. And I remember that it began with me almost like having a conversation. And I wrote the conversation down, like, what do you think about? How am I supposed to do with my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
So it started as a conversation, and I dedicated a day a week. Every Friday, I told myself, okay, let's meet every Friday. Sit
Mm-hmm.
down and talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, God was back then still God as the creator, some kind of universal light and love, but not a personal God, and not my dad or our dad, but
Mm-hmm.
like a force or a source of some kind. But in that conversation, we started to have a more personal relationship. I came with my problems. I asked him, why do I feel like this? And I remember that he once told me, Marie, you have to grieve. And I said, I don't know. I don't know how to grieve. So it felt like that light that once first entered my mind started to, shine deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down inside of me. And with the divorce, I had time to be with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I had 3 children, always looking out for them, their needs. And
Yeah.
suddenly I have, space in my calendar to think and listen to my own thoughts and feel my own feelings. So it wouldn't have been possible without the divorce. It wouldn't. There was no room for our relationship.
Right. Let me just say also, because I feel like sometimes when you went to the meditation group and you felt the love and the way that you described it, it's not like you went home and asked your husband for a divorce.
No.
You had, what year was your son born?
2002.
Okay, so you went home, you're trying to communicate what happened to your husband, and a few years later, you have another child together. You're going to the meditation um, group for 4 years. Like you're in the process of developing a relationship with God, with yourself, with what is going on and trying to make sense of all of this. And I just want to say that because I feel like sometimes we talk about taking a leap in our lives, which there are times where it's like, but there's also the point where it's like almost like you're backing up and getting ready for the time where you're going to move forward and then take the leap. But it's not about a big reaction to something where you just create the disruption in your life. There was something stirring with you for a period of time. And then when did the two of you separate? For what year?
2007.
Okay. So we're talking about
8 years
eight,
later.
right. We're talking about an
Almost
8 year.
9, because it was in the end of 2007. So
Uh-huh.
almost 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I just want to presence
Yeah.
that for listeners that we're talking about today a 25-year relationship building with
Yeah.
God and with yourself. And it didn't come from just running away from life. It came, if anything, from kind of planting yourself, like getting more anchored until you knew what the next step was. And the next step was to divorce and to create the space for
Yeah.
even more of a connection, and that was a 10-year process in many ways.
Yeah,
Um,
I had to heal. That was what I felt. I
yeah.
had to heal, and it was not possible within the relationship. I
Mhm.
wanted that.
Yeah.
I wanted us to heal.
Hmm.
I wanted, I when my son was born in 2000 and yeah, in January 2002, when I held him in my arms, I felt I need to heal my background, my childhood. I had
Hmm.
a father who was an alcoholic. So I need to heal because I cannot look at my son and see him for who he is because I'm wounded from my own childhood.
Yeah.
So I want to heal. And before he turned 1, I was so sick. I was so sick. It felt I was, yeah, on the edge of a psychosis. I couldn't handle more, you know.
Yeah.
So, and still I stayed
Hmm. Hmm.
for 5 years.
Yeah.
Then I came to that point where if I can't anymore. I can't. Not for me and not for my children. I have to do this work,
Mhm.
what you call the ancestral work. I have to do it
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm still wounded. I felt that. I'm still wounded. My father is dead, but I'm still wounded. I
Hmm.
have to recover from that. And it would have been impossible without God.
Yeah. And this is the moment of courage,
Yeah.
of saying that you're going to end something to create the space, knowing that it wasn't about um, trying to do something to your children. It was actually to do something for your children. And this was the way through. And I feel like that's also part of the whole idea of carving a new path, is that sometimes the old path that is the traditional path, or something that we expected, that we get married and stay in the relationship for 50 years, it's that no, there's something that actually there's another path to go on. So I know it's a huge conversation, but I'm wondering if what would you say? Yeah, tell us a little bit about the points where your relationship began with God and how you began to see things changing in this 25-year window, that, yeah, what would you share about how God became dad?
Mm. After that first experience, I felt like I had that presence from the Archangel Gabriel with me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he is with me. In some way, he is with me. And he stayed with me for 13 years. That's how I felt. And then the other angel came, Archangel Michael. And so, just like in the Bible, it was Gabriel who came with the message that God exists, and he loves you, and
Mm-hmm.
you are loved unconditionally, with all your darkness and all your light. Um, and then Michael came into my life, and I felt that presence, and he wanted me to, it was almost like he was my teacher of new boundaries, of self-value. And that happened within me because I have started to meditate again. And I have this huge inner world. unbelievable. It's like, it's the same thing for me to go out in nature as it is to just step into myself. I don't have to, sit in a specific posture or do some breathing. It's just like I just walk inside of me, and there it is, earth inside of me. And within that, I also have these encounters with the angels. And when I started to, as I said, every Friday, to make an appointment, to start a conversation and have that conversation, through writing, like asking him questions and what is love and how to do with my daughter and why do I feel this in my heart. So that was one huge step forward, a more personal friendship with him. And then in 2000, and I have to think back, in 2016, I was really, really sick again. And I was worn out, fatigue. I had no life energy left in me whatsoever. And at that point, I sat down and I just felt like I was at the bottom of myself. Like, I had hit the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was empty. And I started to write again and make some illustrations. And I tried. That was my first step of, trying to write to God as if he was my father.
Mm-hmm.
What will happen if I speak to him as a father? If I write to him as a father, hey, dad, And out of that, Sötnusen, the character, the inner child, the divine child, was born. And that part of me, immediately knew that this is my father. He's not just our father. He's not just the creator. He's my dad. And then that relationship has grown from the child within me, who's finally at the age of almost 50, had found a father, the father that I never had. Now I had a father. He was my father. And what I felt when I was drawing Sötnusen was like I was sitting at my table with my papers and pencils, and I was leaning towards his, shoulder. So the presence of God was actually like he was sitting beside me, and he was looking at all the drawings that I did, and he loved them all. And he put them up all, on his walls, in his house, everywhere. He didn't throw away one, illustration, one drawing. He saved them all and he loved them all. And that continued for years. I was just drawing like a maniac.
Mm-hmm.
Over and over and over and over again. And that was like I came in contact with what I call the image of God.
Yeah.
That is beyond all the human, my humanness. That piece of God that he had put inside of me. I found that on the bottom of myself when I had no life left to live. That was what I felt. I was dying. I was starving. I couldn't eat. My whole body, my whole system was just saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he turned up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, he turned up, and the thing that I'm really struck by, because I never really connected it this way in our conversations, but I've also seen this with other women in particular who've had kind of, I'll just call it a health crisis, a time where something was going on with your physical body, that the connection to God and God holding you while you did the illustrations, while you shared, what was coming through you was a reclaiming and restoration of your inner child. And and it feels so important to understand when our physical body is going through that kind of a challenge, that to go back to connect with the inner child, I'll just use that, the childlike part of yourself, with the support of the father energy that brings unconditional love. And that is the beginning of your relationship in that meditation, was to feel that unconditional love that you had never felt before. And what a beautiful evolution of reclaiming that, as well as you sharing with others the beauty of Satnasan. And I think in English it translates to like sweetness or sweet one. Yes, is that
yeah,
what you've seen?
yeah,
And again, sometimes the translation is, but it gives you the idea of that sweet little one that is inside all of us. So, Marie, I'm wondering
I just
how,
want to add one thing
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
So it's like when I look back, it's like it took God from January 1999 until December 2016 to reach himself in me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I helped along the way as good as I can, with writing and doing the heal my voice and, finding out the truth about and sensing, being with my feelings, feeling fully, meditating and walking and whatever I could do to help, to unpack myself from all the garbage that I carried in my life
Yeah.
and all the sorrows and all the griefs and losses and everything. So it took him, it quite some time. So at that point, the light that I met in 1999 had finally, yeah, moved through all the darkness and into the child. And when I decided to just be with that inner child and allow her to draw through me, to express herself, to take up, hours every day, I turned that motherhood that I had with my children, often their friends, as a spiritual leader for other women, and within Heal My Voice, giving birth to 3 books. I turned that motherhood towards myself. So my body became the mother for Satnusen to work within.
Yes.
I sat with her as a mother and allowed her to draw hours for hours without saying, I don't understand, just allowing her to draw whatever she wants to draw, unfiltered and with the presence of the Father. So, and that motherhood has then become a mother for the inner teenager, the inner woman, and also the mother to others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's learning how to love myself again.
Yeah. and to let that love in that was given to you
Yeah.
in January 1999.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's almost like with her birth, certain instance, the light that came from somewhere into my body reached the bottom, and now it turns, it's going up again and out.
Mhm. Yeah. So I know our time for this first show is kind of coming to a close, and I want us to uh, circle into what would help bring it to a close. Anything that you want to share. The first thing I want to say though is for listeners to think about how, the change, or once there's a new path, it continues to evolve, and there are going to be times where you stop along the path and you need to sit down and collect yourself, or you need to pause, and that it didn't all just happen. This has been a 25-year journey, and even now that Marie has graciously said yes to talking about it more, um I mean, believe me, she's shared along the path also things, or I'm also seeing you walking along the road, sitting down, and then strangers come and join you, because that's really what has happened here. But to be patient with yourself, to give yourself grace, to know that those falling down moments are part of what needs to happen for you to stand fully within yourself. So I want to just say that. I also want to say that in the show page, there are social media links and links to Marie's website where you can see the illustrations that she's talking about. And so I encourage you to go and check that out. So Marie, to kind of wrap up this first part of the series, what would you like to share with the listeners?
I want to go back to the title of the show, Abba.
Mhm.
In December 2013, the day after the big book launch of the first Hear My Voice Sweden book, Värdefulla röster, Worthy Voices, I was just so tired. Oh my God, I was so tired. It was amazing, but I was so tired. I was at a friend's house and I heard a voice saying, "Go to church," that evening. And something in me honors that, when I hear that voice, that deep listening. So I Googled and saw that there is a church close by, my friend. And that day, it was a Thursday, the day before Lucia in Sweden, where we celebrate the light. So it's so funny, everything.
Mhm.
And at that same night, there was a service, So I walked with my friends over to the church and celebrated the first service, mass. Do you call it mass?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was the starting point of me becoming Christian.
Mm.
I was called into church. God asked me to go to church. And I guess that I haven't thought about this before, but now I'm thinking it, that maybe when I have heard that somewhere in the gospel, Jesus says, he calls the God our Father, Abba.
Mm.
And that is what he wants to give us, the to be like children. Not to act as children, but to be like children, with God, to recover the faith of the child that we are born with. So maybe he just gave me the permission that's what I'm thinking now, to try to call him dad. I haven't thought about that earlier, but now I realize maybe I have heard that, just that piece in the gospel when he says, Dad, Abba. So, yeah. And in the next episode, I will talk about Jesus, the relationship to him that came years before I entered church. So he was planted in me. He also. So yeah. So
Yeah.
Abba, the father, not the Swedish pop group.
Mhm.
I'm taking back that name. I love Abba too, to dance, but to call God Father changes something within ourselves. To have a father that is eternal, always present, and even though he's your father too and everyone's father, I am always first in line.
Mhm.
And you too, but I'm
Yeah.
always first in line. And that feeling,
Yeah.
and knowing that that is true, I'm always first in line. I can come to God with whatever, small things and big things, and just know that what I can expect is what I met in the beginning. Unconditional love, light, peace, joy, but also direction,
Mhm.
guidance, boundaries, new boundaries. This is good for you. This is not good for you. Just like a normal father or mother. This is not good for you. Go this direction. So I have developed a very deep listening, and I'm listening with my whole body, not with my mind, not only with my heart, my whole body speaks. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to shine a light on how what you shared was that you made an appointment and had a weekly conversation. And that is about building a relationship. And so I just want to say that to the listeners to think about how you build relationships.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and to have a conversation, which does shift things for sure, because then you can go with anything. You can go with any question. It doesn't have to be like what we might call a big question. It can be any size question.
I invited him into my life.
Yes.
Come every Friday and let's have a conversation. And years later, he said, please come to my house and let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is
Yes.
how you build relationship and trust and friendship.
Yes.
It's me coming to you and you coming to me
Mm.
asking for your friendship, and you asking, who are you?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So thank you, Marie. And I'll just end for the listeners that in the show page, like I said, there are links to Marie's website and the social media links to connect with her. And there's also a link to the Incubator Creativity Community, free community on Facebook. So feel free to find us there also. And thank you. And I look forward to the next conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
So with that, I'll say thank you to the listeners for being here, and we will meet again. Bye-bye now.
Bye.